What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the program, Breaking the Contain. My name, of course, is Drew Dahlson, and hoping you guys are all having a fantastic start to your Thanksgiving week, as I know I am, because the Rams, my Los Angeles Rams, are now sitting atop the National Football Conference standings, and certainly a topic we're going to delve into today. We're going to talk a little bit about the Rams, mainly about kind of the top of the NFC as a whole, but got to talk about how dominant the Rams looked, how they look primed and ready to go for a Super Bowl run. We're going to take a little bit of time talking about last night's abomination of a football game. Of course, the 49ers versus the Carolina Panthers. And again, we're going to dive into that game, but man, I feel bad for all of us who had to spend 2 to 3 hours of our lives watching that game. As man, that was one hell of a disgrace of football from both quarterbacks, to be honest. So we'll get into that. That'll kind of mesh into our review of what the NFC is looking like today. Sit back, relax, enjoy the next 30 minutes or so of football discussion. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. I want to take a moment before we really start getting analytical here to talk about the word culture and how it pertains to sports. I'm sure most of us have been in a position where we have worked at a job where maybe potentially the culture was not as strong as we had liked. We see what the after effects of that lack of culture can be. We can have disgruntled employees. We can have kind of a power struggle between management and the rest of the team. Overall, it just becomes a negative experience for all, and it can really prove to be a detriment to the success of whatever organization that be. Whatever job you're doing might not be as entertaining, I guess, or as you may not be as invested in your job if the top to bottom culture of that organization is not solid. And with that in mind, I can't help but think about my situation here in Tennessee right now, being able to observe the Tennessee Titans while also being able to watch my favorite football team, the Los Angeles Rams. And I see two completely different sides of that spectrum. I think about the Rams when they had just moved to the city. They were a pretty pathetic excuse of a football team. They had hired Jeff Fisher, who most of you might recall for his classic Hard Knocks quote of "We're not going 7-9 or 8-8 or 9-7," which, by the end of his tenure there, 7-9 seemed like a pipe dream. Coincidentally, of course, Jeff Fisher, a Tennessee Titans football legend out here, but I digress. So the Rams were in free fall. They had moved to the city of LA. They needed to make some kind of drastic change to validate the investment that owner Stan Kroenke had made in relocating his team thousands of miles away into a city with a winning culture. You look at LA and it has the Lakers, who of course are one of the most legendary teams of the National Basketball Association. And as proven just a short time ago, the Los Angeles Dodgers, who are the antithesis these days of winning in Major League Baseball. So the Rams made a decision to take a gamble of a hire, actually, and they took a chance on a 30-year-old head coach named Sean McVay. Move that a lot of people in that time, including some former Rams head coaches, including Mike Martz, regarded as kind of a fool's errand of a hire. They didn't see the young whippersnapper of a head coach competing in this competitive league. And with that decision came a fundamental shift in ideology. Being a player on the Los Angeles Rams meant more than just being the most talented guy available. It meant coming in every day and giving your best effort that today doesn't have to be the best, but as long as it's better than yesterday, and as long as my team around me carries that same kind of determination, then things are going to progress in a way that makes us a much more successful team than we had seen for the past 10 years in St. Louis. And that started with the energy that Sean McVay had brought to the team. And over the course of the years, we had seen this team be able to elevate slowly and surely to a point of being a true competitor. Of course, the first year of the Sean McVay era was successful and he found the playoffs, but they lost to the Patriots Patriots in the Super Bowl when they had Jared Goff at quarterback. McVay had kind of flirted with the idea of becoming a broadcaster. And even through all of this change, all of this positive progression, really setting the tone of what this organization may be, it still found itself back in a place where it could easily have fallen into a lull and things could have collapsed very quickly. But then you have to think about what McVay did to preserve that. And I think a lot of that comes in the form of Matt Stafford. For how successful Sean McVay and the Rams were prior to the acquisition of Matt Stafford, I like to think that that moment is what truly solidified him as the ultimate CEO and leader of this team. It was their final chance to take one last shot to really prove that we are committed to excellence. We may be doing the right things in practice, and that structure is already there, but we are one true piece away from being able to fully realize this vision of success that we've kind of come to expect. And as professionals in their respective field, something that you should be looking for. And I think bringing in Matt Stafford was that moment for them, as Matt Stafford, of course, kind of had his own little falling out with the city of Detroit and found himself in a similar situation of falling into that lull of repetitive apathy that was the culture of the Detroit Lions. And now, finally, as a part of a winning culture, we see Stafford really becoming the best version of himself. And I'm going to play a little clip from his press conference after the game Sunday. And I just want you to think about how his mentality of what he sees in not only himself, but his fellow teammates, how it kind of fits into this fundamental identity shift that the Rams have overgone over the last few years, and really see how this routine of success has come to be, and how as long as Matthew Stafford is reigning the helms of the Los Angeles Ram offense and team in general, it's going to continue for quite a while. So here's that snippet for you real quick.
I still kind of live and die with practices sometimes, and if I have a bad one, it kind of eats me up for the day. I can't wait to get back out there. So, all that is earned, and it's never going to be perfect. You're not going to sit out there and throw the ball exactly where you want to and go and do everything you want to every single time, but just trying to always push myself and my teammates to be as good as we can. And the fun thing for me is we got a locker room full of the same kind of guys, and that just want to, perform for each other and be there for our team. And it's so cool when all these guys are scoring touchdowns and everybody's pulling for each other. It's a lot of fun to be a part of.
And I think that mentality has truly allowed this defense to really come into its own. I mean, you think about the beginning of the year and the reason why so many pundits and the media didn't really choose the Rams as a top 5 Super Bowl contender would have been that youth and inexperience on the defensive side of the ball. And as the years gone by, you've seen guys like Kobe Durant, who of course had the pick 6, and really one of the big acquisitions for the Rams, Emmanuel Forbes, who is a guy that Washington had given up. He was a first-round pick in 2023 and kind of cast to the side of the road, and McVay able to bring a guy like that into this culture and this identity of excellence has really turned his career around, I would say. He's had a great year. He had 5 big pass breakups in that game versus Tampa, and it's a unit that's getting better and better and really becoming more and more cohesive as the weeks go on. And, you think about what it takes to win a Super Bowl, and it's always the most complete team, right? From a top to bottom standpoint, both sides of the ball. So many different units have to be really well-oiled and the gears have to be turning the right way. And you look at the Rams, and whether it be their pass rush and their front four and the tenacity of their linebackers to really attack the run, and of course the secondary being able to contain the wide receivers on the outside, it's one of the better defensive units in the league to pair with, of course, an MVP season in Matt Stafford, and really the resurgence of a Devontae Adams, another guy that people said was washed up going into this year. So, the Rams sitting at 9-2, the number 1 seed, couple big wins against some playoff seeded teams back to back in Seattle and Tampa Bay. And, the odds would say it. The odds have the Rams as the hands-on Super Bowl favorite. Of course, Stafford, the hands-on MVP favorite. But you can't help but argue that this is the most complete team in football. And you take some time to look around the rest of the league. And of course, Philadelphia, a team that fell from that number 1 seed after their 21-point collapse to the Dallas Cowboys in what turned out to be a really shocker of a game. Of course, getting outscored 17-0 in the second half. And it's a team that defensively is among the best in the league, of course, but you can't help but think offensively they can get a little one-dimensional and kind of rely on the legs of Saquon. And, sometimes this season when he's not tush pushing, Jalen Hurts has been kind of a disappointment from an offensive side of the ball. He hasn't necessarily been losing you games, I would say, but he hasn't been that surefire quarterback that's going to go out and win you the football game. And I think the Eagles at this moment kind of need that switch up. They really need him to start playing a little bit better. And luckily enough for them, there's plenty of time left in the season, with this last week only being week 12. But certainly an aspect that the Eagles will need to address as the weeks move forward. Of course, Seattle with another win against a really bad Tennessee Titans team, and Seattle able to put 30 up on the board. Sam Darnold having a nice bounce back game after throwing 3 picks against the Rams. He goes 244 for 2 touchdowns against a bad Titans team, but that would probably be the biggest hole for them as well. Sometimes that offense can sputter, and he kind of has a little bit of that Jared Goff in him, where if you just get a little bit of pressure on him in the pocket, that he can get a little fluttery with the football and can be prone to make some turnovers happen. So definitely some holes for those two teams. That being said, I would say those are the 2 biggest contenders. For the Rams, I would say the biggest challengers rather. Of course, Detroit's there too. And with a guy like Gibbs kind of doing what he's doing, 219 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns. Think he even caught 12 passes on the afternoon as well. That's a team that you're going to have to look out for too. All these teams have certain holes with them, and I think moving forward, the Rams are the class of the NFC, and they're going to be, barring injuries, and as these other teams kind of develop at the later half of the year, I think the Rams at this point on a weekly basis should be your NFC favorite. And on the topic of some teams with some glaring holes, we have to talk about last night's abomination of a Monday Night Football game between the Carolina Panthers and the San Francisco 49ers. And folks, that was definitely a rough one last night, as turnovers were the story of the first half of that game. And, I'll be honest, going into it, I had pretty big expectations for Carolina. They've been relatively irrelevant over the last few years, and Bryce Young being able to get the Panthers to a 6-5 record and really a win away from leading the NFC South. I was kind of excited to see if Bryce Young could bring that first overall pick energy rather, and kind of prove the haters wrong, me being one of them. And for the first time in really a few years, I fell for the trap. +7 was the spread going into that game, and you could tell within the first couple drives for the Panthers that just was not going to happen. Of course, Bryce Young finishing the afternoon with 2 interceptions in that game, including really the big one, the just energy-killing first interception within the 5-yard line after Brock Purdy had thrown one himself. And, I don't know what to say about this Carolina team. Of course, they have a very talented receiver in Tet McMillan, and they were able to connect on a 25-yard touchdown later in that game, but I just don't know if Bryce Young is capable of being one of those guys to lead you to a not just playoff, like a strong playoff season, but really a Super Bowl either. And I've always held the mindset that there's a collection of a few quarterbacks that are truly capable of winning a Super Bowl, winning not only well enough in the regular season to get there, but to really put together 3 to 4 wins in the competitive nature of a playoff setting to get you into the big dance. And I think after 3 years of the Bryce Young experiment, I think it's starting to become apparent that he might not be one of those guys. And, along those same lines, I would say Kyler Murray's kind of one of them too. And I think the Arizona Cardinals may get pretty close to shipping him off going into next season, but that's not what the segment's about today. We're talking about last night's game. And I think last night was, one of those, first off, I thought it was one of those opportunities for him to kind of prove people wrong in that aspect. Big primetime game, kind of in the same light that Stafford was able to ride that momentum to a big jump in the MVP odds. These nighttime primetime games where the entire country is watching you is really the golden opportunity to establish that storyline and showcase to the world why you are that player and why you are that number one overall pick. And I would say last night he unfortunately did the opposite and proved a lot of people right instead of wrong. So definitely a tough one for Carolina last night. They kind of relied heavily on the arm of Bryce Young, I would say. They didn't rush it too much. I would say Rico Dowdle was a little underutilized in that one. And, the team in general only rushed it 9 times with guys not named Bryce Young. So, and it's not like they were ever too far out of the game to not implement the run at all. But at the end of the day, they trusted Bryce Young. They said, go win us this game. And he responded by really not playing too well. 169 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 ugly interceptions, all to the tune of a 13.5 quarterback rating. So not a good night for Bryce Young. But on the other side, though, Brock Purdy not much better. And we saw him do something in the first half that no quarterback has done this season. That's throw 3 interceptions. And, to that other point, it's not like the Niners dominated this game by any means. In fact, like I said at the top of this segment, it was one of the uglier games of the weekend. And Brock Purdy kind of showing why. I mean, of course, he's coming off, that turf toe injury, only his second start since that. I think he missed about 7 weeks prior to that, but definitely didn't look too sharp. And, in the post-game presser, he said that he wouldn't blame rust or the injury on some of those throws, which if that's true, then that's a concern in itself. But Purdy definitely didn't give you that aura of a guy that's ready to make that Super Bowl run. And, with so many people kind of questioning whether Mac Jones was going to be the guy moving forward after he was able to keep San Francisco in the playoff race, you have to think that, maybe this offense, and this is something I've always thought, but last night was definitely an eye-opener, I'm sure, for a lot of people. And it's not like it's the craziest take in the world, but this team is Christian McCaffrey. If this team didn't have Christian McCaffrey, and I'll say this, where the Rams made the great trade of getting Matt Stafford, the 49ers making the trade to get Christian McCaffrey is one of the biggest trades to any organization, maybe of all time. And of course, it hasn't resulted in a Super Bowl, but the way that he just controls that entire offense, it is mind-boggling to me what this guy can do. I mean, yesterday, 31 total touches, 24 carries for 89 yards. Not the best stat line, I would say, from a carrier aspect for Christian McCaffrey. 1 touchdown, 3.7 yards per carry, but certainly enough to kind of dictate the offensive side of the game for the Niners. He had 7 receptions to the tune of 53 yards as well. And it becomes more and more apparent that this offense is never going to be the team that takes shots down the field. To be honest, I think they're kind of a boring offense from a play calling aspect. It's really George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey. Receivers are okay, like pretty. I don't even know. I mean, I know Jawan Jennings had the touchdown later in the game, but I'm trying to think of I know they have Parasol. I mean, it says here that Purdy had 23 receptions. Out of those 23, 13 are going to Kittle or Christian McCaffrey. It just proves to you that they're not really a team to open up the field. And I think for what Brock Purdy's getting paid, I just think that's a detriment to what this offense can be. And, you're going to see it kind of shape up, and we have seen it shape up in the form of kind of some star players walking away from the 49ers. And as a team that everyone thinks is going to compete for the NFC West, and you look at the explosibility of the Rams offense and how suffocating Seattle's defense can be, I just don't know if San Francisco is one of those teams that's going to be able to compete at as high of a level as those other 2 teams. 2 teams that I expect to truly be in it till the end. Though my two favorites for the NFC Championship. I don't think they can rise up to that level. I don't think Purdy can rise up to that level. I don't think Bryce Young can rise up to the level of being anything more than a mediocre quarterback. And I think that's just the way that this game kind of played out, and really the big takeaways for me in that one. So San Francisco 8-4, definitely respectable. They've had a little bit of a cupcake schedule, playing that third place schedule, but I think the record is a little over. I think the record sample size is a little skewed, and I'd be shocked to see the San Francisco 49ers really make it anywhere past maybe a first round victory. But even so, I'd be shocked because they're probably going to have to match up against a pretty good team unless they get the winner of the NFC South. Then they should be able to take care of business there. But I think if they have to play any other division winner, I don't like the 49ers making it out of the first round. So that's going to wrap it up on the more opinion-driven analysis of some of these bigger games this weekend. And kind of wanted to take a quick little moment to run through the rest of the slate and give you kind of my quick 10 to 15 second opinions on some of these games. And we'll start in Chicago, where the Bears continue to roll to an 8-3 record, beating the Steelers 31-28. Of course, this one came down to the wire. Caleb Williams truly continuing his impressive season, fingernails painted and all. So Bears moved to 8-3 and are now atop the division of the NFC North. Patriots and MVP hopeful Drake May squeak out a win against a hurting Cincinnati Bengals team. They win that game by a score of 26-20. Drake May's stat line 294 yards and 1 touchdown as the Patriots move to 10-2 on the season. Out in Detroit, really one that came down to the wire, went to overtime. Jahmyr Gibbs with one of the more impressive efforts of the weekend. Few long touchdowns in there, 15 carries, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Also added about 11 receptions, as well as the Lions take down the Giants in a thriller. Out in Green Bay, the Packers move to 7-3-1 on the year after beating a kind of disappointing Minnesota Vikings team by the score of 23-6. Not an impressive game by Jordan Love by any means, but Emmanuel Wilson taking 28 carries for 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. Packers offense not as impressive as it was last year heading into the playoff race. Certainly something they're going to want to clean up moving forward. And we elaborated a little earlier. The Seahawks beat the Titans 30-24. Sam Darnold 244 yards, 2 touchdowns. JSN, what can you say? My vote for Offensive Player of the Year. I know Jonathan Taylor's up there as well, but 8 receptions, 167 yards, 2 touchdowns. If you have him on your fantasy team, you are as happy today as you have been all year long. And another overtime game as the Chiefs, I had a script in mind for the Chiefs today if they'd lost, but they didn't. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that one out. Chiefs win in overtime 23-20, kind of keep their season alive. Impressive 5-1 home record at Arrowhead as they take down a surprise team in the Colts who, despite everything about Daniel Jones's resurgence here, I don't know if I trust them moving into the playoffs. Chiefs exactly where they've been the last few years, struggle at this middle point in the season, but certainly kind of staying alive, and I'm sure come playoff time, that defense that usually sharpens up pretty well. So Mahomes, 352 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. The Ravens, again, they are fighting for that AFC North title at the moment. Take down the New York Jets 23-10. Derrick Henry with a very nice effort on the ground, 21 carries, 64 yards, 2 touchdowns. Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns in his first career start take down a lowly Raiders team. And, Shedeur didn't do anything too exciting. He kind of had a little bit of happy feet in the pocket, but for the first time since 1995, a Cleveland quarterback in his first start gets a win. So good for Shedeur. Silence a few of those haters for another week. The Jaguars, another overtime game here as the Jaguars take down the Cardinals 27-4. I'll be honest, this is a game I did not watch a single snap of, but it looks like Jacoby Brissett, impressive game for Arizona as they kind of go into the offseason contemplating whether or not they're going to ride with Kyler Murray as their future quarterback. So Cardinals fall to 3-8 on the year, 1-5 at home. So it looks like good old State Farm Stadium might be a better place for the Rams and the Cardinals these days. But moving on, the big one, Eagles choking a 21-0 lead against the Cowboys. Dak Prescott absolutely slinging it all across the yard, 354 yards, 2 touchdowns. Pickens coming down with some insane catches of his own, 9 receptions, 142 yards, and a touchdown as the Cowboys move to 5-1 on the year and slowly, potentially inching their way closer to the Eagles and that NFC East lead. A game that I'm sure absolutely no one watched. Not a lot of interest in this one, unless you are a Rams fan, might I add, because the Rams do have the Falcons' first round pick, and with Michael Penix out, an opportunity for the Rams to jump up the draft board, but unfortunately they were playing Tyler Shaw and the lowly New Orleans Saints as they beat them at 24-10 in NOLA, and not a lot of eyes on that one unless you got Bijan on your fantasy team, who had 14 carries and 70 yards. And of course, we already kind of delved into these other two games. Rams beat the Bucks 34-7, solidifying Matthew Stafford's lead in the MVP race. And final game of the week, the 49ers take down the Panthers 20-9 with what many would consider an all-around ugly football game. And guys, I want to thank you guys for tuning in today. Looking forward to kind of delving into the college football playoff later this week as we approach really the most important time of college football season, and that's going to be bowl season as well as conference championships and the start of the college football playoff. So all that being said, guys, thank you so much for tuning into this second episode, this November 25th episode of Breaking the Contain. And whatever platform you're listening on, if you enjoyed the show today, feel free to throw us a follow. And if you want to reach out to us, you can leave a comment on our Spotify podcast section of the show, as well as feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Drew_Dahlson. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. This has been Breaking the Contain. My name is Drew Dahlson, and we'll see you guys again for the next episode.